Welcome to Leading Behind the Scene. I'm your host, Gwendolyn Young, the go-to business and operations consultant for six-figure CEOs who are ready to reach their next level of growth. And I'm ready to share tools, strategies, and tips to help you excel in your business and your life. If you're a service-based entrepreneur, be sure to join me each Thursday. Find me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And don't forget to follow the show on your favorite podcast player so you never miss an episode. And if you love the content, leave me a rate and review. Now let's get into today's episode.
For today's special episode, all about lessons we can learn from failure in business. I am your guest host, Maria Moore, brand and operations strategist and founder of the Template Bar. Failure. We all know that F word that we run from, we hide from it, we try to avoid it. Failure can be a learning experience as long as we know how to deal with it. When a business owner fails, it may be due to several different reasons. When we take the time to determine what led up to us coming to this point of quote unquote failure, and if we learn how to avoid those same things that got us in that position in the future, that's the most effective way to learn from the failure. We know there's no guaranteed method for building a successful business that is perfect. We've all heard experience is the best teacher, but let's be real, y'all. We know that's simply not true in every situation. Experience is not always the best teacher. It has never been, and it never will be. We know becoming mature in our business doesn't always come with time. Sometimes all age brings is nothing more than wrinkles and gray hair. But if we want to make the most of that time, if we want to make the most of the experiences, we have to set our minds in the right direction. So instead of saying that our own experience is going to be the best teacher with these failures, we should evaluate other people's experience, really taking time to reflect and think on the experiences of others who have come before us can be very insightful. We can take lessons from the past and study those and glean from these experiences. It can be so helpful in our journey for dealing with failure, right? I want to share a few valuable lessons that failure has taught me in the hopes that other entrepreneurs, new, upcoming, or even seasoned entrepreneurs can learn from mistakes that I've made. The first lesson that I learned is to pivot my failures into growth. Once I accepted that failure was going to be part of my growth mindset, that was my starting point where everything changed. Exactly the moment when I realized that I had to fail in order to grow, my mindset was shifted in a positive light. It helped me to be able to address my priorities, develop new approaches when I had to tackle these obstacles that were continuing to come my way. And it set in my mind that I was going to always have to be continuously learning new things. When I knew that it was part of the process, I learned to embrace it. Another thing I learned was focusing on the journey. Conducting business, doing business is all about being lean, performing through different trials, and embracing the errors. Simply, you don't get better at something unless you continue to try it. A failed business attempt usually brings out the realization that the best philosophy in life is not to obsess with the end goal, but rather the means to the end. As long as it's bringing you joy, you're enjoying doing it, there's going to be plenty of growth in that failure. Another thing I learned was maximizing my at-bats. Now, I'm not a huge baseball fan, but when I looked at baseball, and this was a visual element for me, right? And I don't think it's talked about enough. It's a very key element that isn't talked about. So in baseball, the best hitters only get a base hit 3 or 4 out of every 10 at-bats. The same thing holds true for all business owners, right? Where one successful idea could make you millions. So the goal should be to maximize downside so that when you fail, you can get up and swing again. So we should never let one failure take us out completely. I learned that early in my career. Another thing I learned is to move forward after failing fast. You may have heard it, fail fast, fail faster. I learned that when I fail fast and analyzed and learned, and then I move forward, I would not get bogged down by the failures. I would accept my failure as one of the most powerful opportunities I would be given to learn and to grow faster. That was the key, not just sitting down when I fail and sulking in it, right? So if we reflect on the failure with an object in mind, identify any gaps and learn from it immediately. I also learned that if I saw my failure as a learning experience, it completely changed the game. When I fail, like think of you falling down physically, the perspective that you see is completely different than when you're standing up on your feet. So when I saw this as a learning experience, it was a new sights, new perspectives from when I was physically down. Different cultures, different expectations were there. So for instance, in Asian cultures, failing means a loss of face, and it's just unacceptable. In the community, in the culture that I am from, in the African American culture, failure is frowned upon as well. It's looked at as a weakness. But once I redefined what that meant to me, it was a learning experience. And it was a very personal learning experience that no one else could have taught me that. So I set that up in my mind as a learning experience. Locating the weak link was another valuable lesson that I learned. I actually had to look at what I failed at, examine it, locate where I was weak, adjust it, and then I had to try again. That probably was the hardest part, actually trying again. Looking at your mistake, like mulling it over in your mind, that was easy for me. But when it came time for me to be up to bat again, sometimes our mind can tell us like, you're not ready. You can't do it. Remember what happened last time, right? But believe it or not, business is a never-ending cycle of optimization and tweaking. We are going to have to try things over and over and over again. But if we use the failures to guide us to be more focused, then that will lead us towards our success. This is probably the most powerful lesson of all that I learned. I had to understand that defeat is a tool. Now we know in life, a truth of life is that someone will need to be foolish for wisdom to continue to have value. We know that. And there is a characterization of success that's incomplete without the fact of failures. We don't outgrow the war that we're in. Owning a business is war. We can't say, I'm not going to be in war with keeping my business afloat, with gaining new customers, with scaling my business. We simply have to learn how to fight in this war that we are in with owning a business. So when we get to that level with your mindset of knowing that defeat is a tool, we can use this for building ourselves to be able to use this tool more effectively. There's no visionary that knew success and they did not have a failure first. So if you learn to use this defeat as a tool to further yourself in the war that you're in, quote unquote, in business, is so valuable, right? And you are far ahead of the pack if you already have your mentality set on that. Another thing that I learned was to reframe this failure, reframe it as a proactive thing. Now, I believe that failure is only a failure if you do not learn from it. Just like a little child learning to walk. We don't get mad at them for not knowing, but we're supportive, we're encouraging, helpful, loving. So the same thing with business. Innovation, evolution, and progression happen because someone is pushing to the edge, falling, getting back up, trying again. If there was no one failing, we would not have innovation. So failure requires a reframe. It's not a negative thing, but it's a proactive thing. Something else I needed to shift my mindset on was to embrace those needed changes. Failure is part of growing. And as you pursue entrepreneurship, always keep in mind that the chances are, if you don't study and learn, your business will fail. That's the simple fact. Taking time to organize all my thoughts and realizing what I did wrong and embracing the changes that needed to happen for me to get to the next part or the next step in my business. We know anyone can succeed, but it all comes down to how bad you really want it. And part of you wanting it is embracing the change, whether that's a mindset, whether that's a team, whether that's the environment. You have to embrace the needed changes that you have to make after the failure. Humility was another powerful lesson that I learned. It's key, right? We know failure is necessary and it requires things that we have to refine. But what I don't hear a lot of people talk about is the benefit of this personal failure in the reflection of ourselves. Sometimes we have this perception of self-worth that's not very accurate. We look at our abilities, our talents, and they don't always line up with reality. So failure helps us to kind of systemize our feedback on ourselves as a person. And it can be quite humbling. And those who gain humility from looking at themselves and comparing themselves realistically to what can happen and what cannot, we gain that humility, and that helps us to win in the long run. I also learned that building processes to avoid failure was something that was non-negotiable in my business. So the lesson I learned is not to repeat the past. So if I had a failure, I would have to learn to say, hey, what processes could have safeguarded me from this failure? And what is going to safeguard me from repeating these same failures in the future? So I learned the hard way to be able to minimize these risks. But once I learned that, it was like, okay, we can take what we did in the past incorrectly, change it, learn from it to build something better for our future clients. Yes, losing money is definitely something that you will build a process around quickly so that you can have systems in place to prevent that from happening in the future. So we've shared a lot over these few minutes, but what I want to challenge you is to look at your own business. Look at your failures, dissect them, meditate on what you did wrong, meditate on what you did right. And also remember, falling down helps you to know how to get back up. Failure is not the end of the line, but it's a vital part of a complicated equation that we're all trying to figure out in the success of our business. So reframe your view of failure in your business. Until next time.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Behind the Scenes. I hope you found some encouragement or helpful information today to help move your business and or your life forward. If you have a specific topic you'd like me to talk about or guests you'd like me to have on the show, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. I love connecting with my listeners. Also, be sure to follow the podcast so you never miss an episode and leave me a rating review. I'll see you next week.